While under a Judeo-Christian worldview, truth is unchanging. We know that under that view, it comes from God. It's totally embodied within the character and nature of God, manifested in the person of Jesus Christ. Now, that is truth under a biblical worldview. That aspect has been critical in the progression of human laws, and human laws have been a progression. Now, truth itself was established, but in human law, it has progressed. Here in Pennsylvania, William Penn, 1682, laid out a frame of government, as he called it, which really became an integral set of principles that found its way into a lot of the early constitutions of the states and to the federal. He said this. He said, there is hardly one framework of government in the world so poorly designed by its founders that in good hands could not function well enough. The history of the Romans and the Jewish states tells us that even though in the best framework of government, that in bad hands, bad people in government, that government can do nothing good or anything great. And he said that submission to God's divine law was critical for both the citizens and those in authority if freedom was to endure. And simply put, I put out there before you, that is the biggest threat to our freedoms today, our ideologies that undercut that. David, let's go back on that. With that as a preface, tell us more now just about the Constitution prior to the 14th Amendment and changes made. You started down that road, didn't have time to build it out, but compare, contrast 1787 Constitution to post-14th Amendment 1868 Constitution, which is really what we have before us right now.
Again, the 14th Amendment was passed in 1868. It is a great Constitution. I want to reiterate that fact. I don't want it reversed. I like it. It is the corruption of the 14th Amendment that I oppose. The Supreme Court is using the 14th Amendment as the primary tool to de-Christianize America. That's how they're doing it. It's through the 14th Amendment. It's really not through the First Amendment. It's through the 14th Amendment, because the ticket that gives the Supreme Court to control religion in the United States is the 14th Amendment hooked on to the First Amendment. Without the 14th Amendment, there's no way they can get to the states. The First Amendment has nothing to do with the states. That's why it begins with the word Congress, and it does not include the word state. But the 14th Amendment gives them that power by changing the First Amendment to include the states. Think of it this way. There are 535 members of Congress. There are 435 in the House and 100 members in the Senate. But that's really not true. There are actually 9 more members of Congress. There are really 544 members of Congress. Except these people, you never get to elect them. They never show up on your ballot box in November. The Supreme Court is not just a judicial institution. It is also a legislative body. And the way they interpret the 14th Amendment is basically to do this. It is a transfer of power. Power is transferred from the states to the central government in Washington, D.C. For example, nobody knew in 1868 we had passed a federal abortion amendment. We found out that that's what they did in 1868 with Roe versus Wade in 1973. Nobody knew in 1868 that the United States passed a federal gay marriage amendment. We didn't learn that until 2015.
Okay, David, I just want you to clarify that may be a little confusing to those who are listening. What you're saying is that when abortion by the Supreme Court was ruled, or marriage, so forth, the Supreme Court used the 14th Amendment to justify what they did. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, what they're doing is they have taken all of these issues like abortion, the issue of gay marriage, all of this stuff, all belongs to the states. That's why the states voted on gay marriage about 30 times, and they voted just about every single time against it. Now, that is what the 10th Amendment is supposed to do. That's what it's for. The Supreme Court basically has taken, with the 14th Amendment, they have effectively erased the 10th Amendment to the Bill of Rights.
You know, this is interesting, David. I'm going down through my copy of the 14th Amendment.
Section 1 is it. That's it. That's all you need to know is Section 1.
Okay,
and I'll
that's
tell you the most important word in the U.S. Constitution for social issues, homosexuality, gay marriage, religion. There's only one word you need to know. It's in the 14th Amendment. It's in Section 1. It's in the Due Process Clause, where it says, no
without
state shall
due
deprive any
process
person of life, liberty, or property. You see that word liberty? That means gay marriage. That means abortion. That means you cannot pray in the public schools. That means you cannot have religion in the public schools. You cannot read your Bible in the public schools. That's what that word liberty means, according to the Supreme Court.
And a lot of it goes back on even the description, or I should say the application of that phrase due process, correct? Because depending upon how the due process would go would determine the outcome of something that's being discussed based upon life, liberty, or property.
Yes, the word due process simply means this. It's a fancy way of saying there has to be a fair trial. And so if there's a fair trial, the government cannot deny you your life, that's execution, capital punishment, liberty, being put in prison, or property, that means issuing you a fine for speeding. No state can deny you any of these things without due process. There has to be a fair trial. The Supreme Court has gone crazy and taken that word liberty to mean the freedom of religion, to mean gay rights, to mean abortion, and anything and everything they can come up with, whatever they dream up next.
And so when we look at the Constitution, David, we can see that sometimes changes will, to the Constitution, strengthen it. Sometimes they weaken the Constitution. But even beyond that, they will strengthen and weaken our freedoms. Explain
Absolutely.
that.
They're taking away our freedom. And they're doing it by due process of law.
There you go.
They're having a fair trial. We have been denied the right to pray in a public school by due process of law. All you have to do, ladies and gentlemen, to know that the word liberty and the 14th Amendment does not mean any of the junk the Supreme Court says it means, is to look at the word liberty from which it came from in the Fifth Amendment. Nobody says the word liberty in the Fifth Amendment refers to school prayer or Bible reading or gay marriage or abortion. But for some mystical reason, that word has all kinds of fanciful meanings in the 14th Amendment.
This is really interesting. And, folks, I have in my hand here The Constitution for Beginners by David W. New. I would encourage you to get it, and maybe, Dave, you can tell us how to get it. But, Sam, this is a little booklet that you probably have it. It is a tremendous booklet in helping people to understand what this Constitution's all about.
David, just quickly, 15 seconds. How can somebody get that from you?
They can get it through Amazon.com.